Isabella Delano had learned very early in life that people made decisions about her before she ever opened her mouth. It happened in ballrooms under chandeliers, in boardrooms lined with glass walls, at charity galas where women in silk gowns smiled with sharp eyes. They saw her body first soft, round, unapologetically present, and quietly rearranged her into something smaller in their minds. Less capable, less disciplined, less formidable. She used to shrink under it when she was younger, used to tug at dresses, avoid cameras, laugh too loudly so no one would notice how uncomfortable she felt. But somewhere between finishing her MBA and sitting through her 50th executive strategy meeting, Isabella stopped shrinking. If they wanted to underestimate her, that was their mistake. And tonight, aboard the Sovereign Star, she could feel the weight of those assumptions pressing in again. The ship was a floating cathedral of wealth. Marble floors veined in gold stretched across the grand atrium. A glass elevator shimmered up 6 decks, reflecting crystal chandeliers that sparkled like captured constellations. Live string music drifted through the air, blending with the faint, expensive scent of imported lilies. Guests in designer tuxedos and couture gowns laughed as champagne flowed freely. Investors from London, tourism ministers from Monaco, shipping magnates from Dubai. Every important person in the maritime luxury world had accepted the invitation. Because when Victor Delano hosted something, it mattered. Isabella stood at the balcony overlooking the atrium, her emerald evening gown hugging her curves without apology. Her dark hair cascaded over one shoulder in soft waves. She looked every inch a Delano, poised, composed, untouchable. But inside, her heart beat faster than the violin crescendo below. Tonight was different. Tonight her father would make an announcement, and only she knew what it was. A gentle presence appeared beside her. "You look like you're preparing for battle," Victor Delano said. His voice carried that familiar warmth. Steady, commanding, affectionate. At 62, he still held himself like the young dockworker who once lifted cargo with his bare hands before building an empire from shipping contracts and sleepless ambition. Isabella glanced at him. "Aren't I?" He smiled faintly. "You've always been braver than you think." She almost laughed at that. Brave wasn't how people described her. Kind, yes. Gentle, sure. But not brave. Her father studied her expression. "Are you ready?" She inhaled slowly, tasting salt from the ocean drifting through the open deck doors. "Yes." Victor nodded once and descended the grand staircase toward the center of the atrium. The music softened. Conversations tapered. When Victor Delano lifted a champagne glass, silence followed like obedience. "Friends," he began, his voice smooth and commanding. "When I bought my first cargo vessel 37 years ago, it had rusted rails and more leaks than profit." Laughter rippled gently through the crowd. "I had no connections, no inheritance, just stubbornness and a belief that the sea rewards those who respect it." Isabella had heard the story 100 times, but tonight it felt heavier. Final. Victor gestured around them. "Today, the Delano fleet includes 12 luxury cruise liners, sailing across 5 continents. We employ over 18,000 crew members worldwide. We've redefined maritime luxury." Applause erupted. Pride flickered in Isabella's chest. This wasn't inherited wealth. It was built. Every polished rail, every 5-star dining hall, every immaculate suite existed because her father had refused to quit. Victor raised his hand again. "And that is why," he continued, voice steady but quieter now, "it is time for a new captain to steer this fleet." The silence that followed was electric. Isabella's fingers curled against the balcony rail. "I will be retiring as CEO of Delano Maritime by the end of this fiscal year." Gasps. Whispers. Several executives stiffened visibly. Victor's gaze lifted upward, toward her. "And effective immediately, my successor will begin transitioning into leadership." All eyes followed his line of sight. Isabella felt it. The shift. The calculation in their expressions. Some smiled politely. Some blinked in surprise. Some did not bother to hide their doubt. "My daughter," Victor said clearly. "Isabella Delano will take over this company." Applause returned, louder this time but thinner. Isabella descended the staircase slowly. Each step felt deliberate, heavy with meaning. As she reached her father's side, cameras flashed. Investors leaned forward. Board members exchanged tight expressions masked as professionalism. Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. "She has studied every division of this company. She holds degrees in international business and maritime logistics. She understands this fleet not just as my daughter, but as a strategist. He turned to her. Say something. Isabella accepted the microphone. For a heartbeat, she saw everything at once. The glittering dresses, the million-dollar watches, the polite smiles concealing skepticism. They expected gratitude. They expected something rehearsed. Instead, Isabella let her gaze travel upward, past the crystal lights, to the glass ceiling where night pressed dark against the ship. When I was 8, she began, voice steady but warm. My father brought me onto one of his first cruise ships. A few amused smiles surfaced. I thought the ballroom was magic. I thought the captain was a king. Soft laughter. But what I remember most, she continued, was getting lost. The crowd quieted. I wandered into a narrow hallway below deck. It was hot, loud, nothing like the marble and chandeliers upstairs. Her voice softened slightly, and a woman in a housekeeping uniform found me. She was exhausted, sweat on her forehead. She must have worked 12 hours already. But she knelt down, smiled, and walked me back to the grand staircase. Isabella's eyes sharpened. She treated me like I mattered. Silence deepened. That moment taught me something. This company isn't marble floors. It's not crystal lighting. It's not champagne. She looked directly at the executives in front. It's the people who work where guests never look. A few faces shifted uncomfortably. And if I am to lead this fleet, Isabella said, I intend to lead it fully, not from a penthouse suite, but with understanding. Her father's expression changed slightly, curiosity flickering there. Polite applause returned. But beneath it, Isabella felt something else. Resistance. When the formalities ended and the music resumed, executives approached in controlled waves. Congratulations, Isabella. We look forward to working closely. We trust you'll maintain standards. She recognized the coded language. Maintain what your father built. Don't experiment. Don't interfere. One board member, Gerald Hawthorne, leaned closer than necessary. Leadership requires discipline, he said mildly, eyes flicking down and back up. It's a demanding role. Isabella smiled politely. I'm aware. He nodded once and drifted away. Her father rejoined her near the balcony. You handled that well, he said. She watched the staff below refill glasses, clear plates, move invisibly through luxury. Did you see their faces? She asked quietly. Victor's jaw tightened slightly. Some of them will always doubt you. Because I'm your daughter? Because you are young, he corrected. She didn't argue. The ocean stretched endless beyond the glass, moonlight slicing silver across the waves. Dad, she said softly, when was the last time you walked below deck without announcing yourself? Victor hesitated. That's what I thought, she murmured. He studied her profile. What are you thinking? Isabella turned to him fully now. If I'm going to lead this company, she said, voice calm but certain, I don't want filtered reports. I don't want department heads performing for me. Victor's brow furrowed. I want to know what really happens on these ships. The music swelled behind them. I want to understand the engine rooms, the crew quarters, the night shifts. A slow realization dawned in his eyes. You're not satisfied with observation, he said. No. What are you proposing? Isabella's lips curved faintly. Not mischievous, not reckless. Resolved. I don't want to inherit this empire, she said quietly. I want to earn it. Victor looked out at the sea. The wind tugged at Isabella's gown. The vast darkness beyond felt alive, unpredictable, powerful. Finally, he spoke. You remind me of your mother when you talk like that. Isabella swallowed. That's a dangerous compliment. He smiled faintly. The sea can be unforgiving. So can boardrooms. Silence passed between them, thick, meaningful. Victor placed both hands on the balcony rail. Finish this voyage, he said at last. Observe. Isabella's eyes gleamed with something stronger than excitement. Determination. Below them, the staff continued moving seamlessly through opulence. Above them, investors toasted the future. And somewhere deep within the steel belly of the Sovereign Star, machinery roared, powerful, relentless, unseen. Isabella watched it all. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the overlooked daughter of a billionaire. She felt like a woman standing at the edge of something vast. The empire of the sea was hers, but she had no intention of ruling it from a distance. Not when the truth might be hidden beneath the golden deck. Isabella did not sleep that night. Long after the orchestra packed away their instruments and the last champagne glass was cleared from the atrium, she stood alone on the private forward deck of the Sovereign Star. The wind pressed cool against her skin, carrying salt and the distant hum of engines below. The ocean at night was honest. No chandeliers, no applause, no polite smiles hiding calculations. Just darkness and depth. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and replayed the expressions from earlier. The tight jaws, the measured congratulations, the way Gerald Hawthorne had emphasized the word discipline like it was code for something else. They didn't think she could do it. Not really. Not because she lacked intelligence. She knew the numbers better than most of them. She had studied maritime trade routes, global port regulations, environmental compliance policies. She could dismantle a profit loss statement in minutes. But knowledge and authority were not the same thing. And Isabella understood something crucial. Authority built from inheritance alone was fragile. If she walked into that boardroom as Victor Delano's daughter, she would spend years fighting to be taken seriously. If she walked in with experience carved into her bones, that was different. Behind her, the deck doors slid open softly. "I thought I'd find you here." Victor's voice carried gently through the wind. Isabella didn't turn immediately. "Do you remember your first voyage as captain of your own vessel?" He leaned beside her at the rail. "I wasn't captain. I was owner. There's a difference." "You know what I mean." He smiled faintly. "I remember being terrified." She finally looked at him. "You never looked terrified." "That's because I couldn't afford to." The engines rumbled below, steady and powerful. Isabella inhaled deeply. "I need to do this properly." Victor studied her face. "Define properly." "I don't want presentations," she said. "I don't want department heads cleaning up their behavior because the boss's daughter is watching." "You already are the boss's daughter. That's the problem." Victor didn't interrupt. "I want to see what happens when no one thinks power is in the room," she continued. "How staff are treated. How complaints are handled. What safety checks actually look like at 3 in the morning. He crossed his arms slowly. "You're talking about auditing. I'm talking about immersion." The word hung between them. Victor's expression sharpened. "Explain." Isabella's voice steadied. "I want to work below deck. As crew." The wind seemed to pause. Victor blinked once. "Absolutely not. I expected that. This isn't a college internship, Isabella. These ships operate on strict hierarchies. Crew quarters are cramped. Shifts are brutal. You're not used to." "Not used to what?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Hardship?" she finished for him. His silence answered enough. Isabella didn't flinch. "Exactly." Victor sighed, looking out at the black ocean. "You think scrubbing floors for a week will make executives respect you? I think understanding what sustains this fleet will make me a better leader." "You already understand operations." "I understand spreadsheets," she corrected. "I don't understand fatigue in someone's voice after 14 hours. I don't understand what it feels like to be dismissed by a supervisor." Victor's jaw tightened slightly. "You built this company from the ground up," she continued. "You know every bolt and seam. But I grew up in penthouses. I went to international schools. I've never had to worry about rent." She turned fully toward him. "If I lead this fleet without knowing what it feels like to serve on it, then I'm no better than every executive who nodded politely tonight." The ship cut through the water, leaving a trail of foam like a scar behind it. Victor was quiet for a long time. "You don't know what you're asking," he said finally. "Crew members sign contracts. There are labor regulations, background checks, identification protocols. Then we create a temporary contract. You want me to fabricate employment records?" "Not fabricate," she said calmly. "Reassign. Internally." He gave her a look that was half exasperation, half reluctant admiration. "You've thought this through." "For years." That caught him off guard. Isabella nodded slowly. "Ever since I started attending board meetings, I saw how detached leadership can become." Victor leaned back against the rail. "If anyone discovers who you are, you'll be treated differently immediately. Then no one can discover it." He studied her face the way he used to when she was a child trying to convince him to let her climb trees that were clearly too tall. "You would have to change your name," he said slowly. "I already have one in mind." His eyebrow lifted. "Bella Santos." He let out a breath through his nose. "Santos. Common enough. Forgettable. Is that what you want to be?" "For now," she replied. Invisible. Victor looked at his daughter, truly looked at her, and something shifted behind his eyes. You understand, he said carefully, that you may see things you won't like. I expect to. You may be disrespected. I've survived worse. His gaze softened briefly at that. And you cannot intervene as Isabella Delano, he added. No special treatment. No revealing yourself. I won't. You would take orders? Yes. From supervisors who don't know you? Yes. He shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. You are your mother's child. Isabella smiled faintly. She would have done the same. That settled something in him. Victor straightened, posture shifting from father to CEO. If we do this, he said, it will be controlled. She waited. You will be assigned to housekeeping. It's physically demanding but visible across departments. You'll observe operations without being confined to one sector. She nodded. You will have a secure communication device concealed. For emergencies only. Agreed. No reckless heroics. I'm not reckless. Victor gave her a look. She softened. I'll be careful. He studied her one last time. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Bella Santos, he said formally. Welcome to the crew. Isabella took his hand firmly. Thank you, Mr. Delano. For a split second, they both smiled. 2 days later, Isabella stood in a modest crew cabin staring at her reflection in a small metal-framed mirror. The transformation was subtle but powerful. Her designer wardrobe was gone. In its place, a plain navy housekeeping uniform. Durable fabric. Functional shoes. Hair pulled into a tight low bun. Minimal makeup. She looked ordinary. No diamonds. No heirloom watch. No Delano. Her heart thudded harder than she expected. A knock sounded at the door. Crew orientation starts in 5. A brisk female voice called. Isabella inhaled deeply. Bella Santos opened the door. The crew corridor was narrow and fluorescent lit. Nothing like the golden hallways above deck. The air smelled faintly of detergent and engine heat. Around her stood 15 other new hires. Men and women from different countries, speaking in accents layered with hope and fatigue. No one recognized her. No one bowed their head. No one looked impressed. A supervisor strode down the line, clipboard in hand. Housekeeping trainees, follow me. Isabella fell into step. They were led deeper into the ship, down steel staircases, past mechanical rooms humming with machinery. The sounds grew louder the further they descended. She had toured engine rooms before, but never like this. Never as someone who belonged here. They reached the crew locker area. Rows of metal compartments. Scuffed floors. Practicality over polish. Shifts begin at 0600. The supervisor said briskly. Cabins must be turned over in under 20 minutes. Precision matters. Guests don't wait. Isabella listened carefully. No executive summary could replicate this. As instructions continued, she felt something unfamiliar rising inside her. Not fear. Not doubt. Awareness. Upstairs, guests sipped imported wine under crystal lights. Down here, the machinery of luxury ran on discipline and exhaustion. And she was now part of it. When orientation ended, the supervisor glanced at her name tag. Santos, she said sharply. You'll shadow senior staff tomorrow. Don't slow them down. Yes, ma'am, Isabella replied evenly. The words tasted strange, submissive but strategic. As she walked back toward her assigned cabin, the ship shifted slightly beneath her feet. For the first time in her life, she was not walking as a Delano. She was walking as a worker, and she felt the difference immediately. No one opened doors for her. No one cleared space. No one softened their tone. In the distance, she heard laughter drifting down from an upper-deck party. Music, clinking glasses, indulgence. 2 worlds. 1 ship. Isabella paused in the corridor and placed her palm lightly against the steel wall. You wanted the truth, she whispered to herself. The engines roared in response. Tomorrow, Bella Santos would begin cleaning the very luxury Isabella Delano had grown up inside. And somewhere in that divide between decks, she knew she would find more than just experience. She would find what this empire truly rested on, and whether it deserved her to lead it. The first thing Isabella learned as Bella Santos was that time moved differently below deck. Upstairs, time floated. Guests lingered over 5-course dinners. They napped in ocean view suites. They posed for photographs as the sun dipped lazily into the horizon. Below deck, time sprinted. At 5:45 a.m., the crew corridor was already alive. Footsteps echoing, lockers slamming shut, tired voices murmuring in multiple languages. The air smelled of industrial detergent and strong coffee. Isabella tightened the laces on her plain black work shoes and followed the other housekeeping staff toward the service elevators. Her muscles were stiff from sleeping on the narrow crew bunk, the thin mattress nothing like the plush suites she once took for granted. No one knew she used to sleep 2 decks above, in rooms that cost more per night than some crew members made in a month. "Move quick," the supervisor barked as they gathered near the supply carts. "Deck 8 turnover. We've got early departures." Isabella nodded and grabbed the handle of a stainless steel cart stacked with towels, linens, miniature toiletries, and cleaning supplies. It was heavier than she expected. She tried not to let it show. The elevator doors opened to Deck 8, guest territory. The contrast hit her instantly. Soft carpet, gentle lighting, the faint scent of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. And yet, now she entered not as a Delano. She entered through the side service corridor. 20 minutes per cabin, the senior housekeeper assigned to her said briskly. Her name tag read Maria. She was in her 40s, with strong arms and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Strip beds first, bathrooms next. Don't forget under the furniture. Guests complain about everything. Yes, Isabella replied. Maria studied her briefly. First contract. Yes. Maria nodded. You'll get used to it. The first suite door clicked open with a master key. Isabella stepped inside and felt a strange sensation, like trespassing in her own memory. She had stood in suites like this before, admiring ocean views, selecting room service menus. Now she saw the aftermath. Rumpled sheets, half-eaten chocolate-dipped strawberries, towels crumpled on the marble bathroom floor, wine stains on the carpet. Maria moved fast, efficient, practiced. Don't think, she said as she stripped the bed in quick motions. Thinking slows you down. Isabella followed her lead. Pillowcases off, sheets pulled, mattress corners tucked tight. Within 5 minutes, sweat prickled at her hairline. The physicality surprised her. Bending, lifting, scrubbing, repeated in sharp, efficient movements. There was no elegance to it, only rhythm. By the 3rd cabin, her arms ached. By the 5th, her back burned. Maria noticed. Use your legs more, she said without judgment. Not your spine. You'll last longer. Isabella adjusted immediately. Thank you. Maria gave a small nod of approval. Around them, other housekeepers moved like synchronized machinery. Doors opened and closed in quick succession. Carts rolled steadily. From down the hallway, Isabella heard raised voices. She glanced up. A young steward stood stiffly near the corner, while a tall man in a captain's uniform towered over him. The captain. Even from a distance, his presence commanded attention. Crisp white uniform, gold insignia, perfectly composed. But his voice was not composed. I asked for accuracy, the captain snapped. Do you understand English? Yes, sir, the steward replied quietly. Then why is the inventory report incorrect? I followed the manifest given to me. The captain stepped closer. Then perhaps you are not competent enough to read it. The steward's face flushed. Sir, Silence. The hallway had gone still. Isabella felt something twist inside her. The captain's tone wasn't corrective. It was humiliating. I will not tolerate incompetence on my vessel, he continued coldly. One more mistake and you will be replaced at the next port. He turned sharply and strode away. The steward remained frozen for a moment before lowering his gaze and walking toward the service stairs. Maria exhaled quietly. Keep working. Isabella forced her hands back to task, but her mind was racing. Is that normal? She asked carefully once they entered the next cabin. Maria shrugged. Captain runs a tight ship. That felt excessive. Maria paused briefly, then resumed scrubbing the bathroom sink. Below deck, you learn not to react. Isabella swallowed her frustration. Upstairs, that same captain would smile charmingly at guests during formal dinners. Down here, fear hung in the air after he passed. By midday, Isabella's uniform clung damply to her back. Her hands felt raw from cleaning chemicals despite the gloves. Her legs trembled slightly each time she pushed the cart. She had never worked physically for 12 hours straight. Never. And yet no one slowed down. At lunch break, the housekeeping team gathered in the crew mess hall, a low ceiling space with long metal tables and fluorescent lighting. The food was simple: rice, grilled chicken, vegetables. Isabella sat at the edge of the table, listening. Conversations buzzed softly. Talk of families back home. Remittances, contracts, rumors of possible overtime cuts. No promotion this year, someone muttered. They say budget adjustments. Always budget adjustments, another replied. Isabella ate quietly, absorbing everything. Then someone across the table slid into the empty seat beside her. You're new. She turned. He looked about her age, mid-20s. Lean build. Oil smudges faintly marking his forearms. Dark hair slightly tousled. His uniform patch read engineering crew. Yes, she replied. Bella. He nodded. Matteo. His voice was steady, calm in a way that felt grounded. Housekeeping? He asked. Yes. First week's the worst. She let out a soft, tired laugh. That obvious? He smiled faintly. You're holding your shoulders too stiff. Means your back hurts. She blinked. It does. Use the railings when you climb stairs. Saves energy. She found herself smiling genuinely for the first time that day. You sound experienced. 3 years on ships, he said. You learn tricks. They ate in comfortable quiet for a moment. Why engineering? She asked. Money, he replied honestly. Better pay than service departments. And I like machines. They make sense. People don't. He gave a half smile. People are complicated. Isabella felt a flicker of something unexpected ease. Matteo didn't look at her the way the executives did. He didn't evaluate her. He didn't dismiss her. He simply spoke. Captain's in a mood today, someone at the table muttered. Matteo's jaw tightened slightly. He's always in a mood. You saw what happened to Karim? Isabella looked up sharply. Karim, the steward from earlier. Matteo nodded slowly. Yeah. He didn't even argue. Doesn't matter, Matteo replied quietly. Up there, they don't need reasons. Isabella's chest tightened. Up there. She used to belong to up there. Now she sat here eating from a plastic tray. The divide felt sharper than ever. After lunch, Isabella followed Maria toward the lower maintenance corridors to retrieve additional supplies. The air grew warmer as they descended. Metal walls vibrated faintly with the constant thrum of engines. They passed the engineering access point, where she saw Matteo crouched near an open panel, tools scattered beside him. He glanced up briefly. Surviving? He asked. Barely, she admitted. He chuckled. Hydrate, and don't let them rush you into injury. Maria called her name and Isabella continued on. By late afternoon, her body was trembling with exhaustion. But beneath the fatigue, something else stirred. Understanding. Luxury upstairs depended entirely on discipline downstairs. Without these workers, Maria, Matteo, Karim, the illusion would collapse. And yet, they moved unseen. Replaceable. The memory of the captain's voice echoed again in her mind. I will not tolerate incompetence on my vessel. His vessel. Isabella pushed her cart back into the storage bay at the end of her shift and leaned against the wall for a moment. Her palms were sore. Her legs ached. She had never felt this physically spent in her life. But she had also never felt this awake. This was the reality behind the chandeliers. Not polished presentations, but sweat, endurance, hierarchy. As crew members filtered past her, laughter rising faintly despite exhaustion, Isabella felt something steady inside her. They deserved better than fear. They deserved leadership that saw them. And for the first time, she understood what that would require of her. It would not be enough to inherit authority. She would have to confront it. Across the corridor, Matteo wiped his hands with a rag and gave her a small nod before heading toward the stairwell. A simple gesture, but grounding. Isabella straightened slowly and picked up her empty cart. Tomorrow would hurt more. Her body would protest. But she would not quit. Because somewhere between the marble decks and the metal corridors, something was wrong. And she intended to find it. By the end of her first full week as Bella Santos, Isabella's body had stopped protesting. It had simply adapted. Her palms were tougher now. Her steps more efficient. She no longer hesitated before lifting mattresses or hauling linen bags twice her size. She had learned to braid her hair tighter so sweat wouldn't loosen it by midday. She had learned which supervisors demanded silence and which allowed quiet conversation while working. Most importantly, she had learned how to disappear. Down here, invisibility was survival. And Isabella was becoming very good at it. But invisibility had a cost. Because the more unnoticed she became, the more she saw. The morning began like any other. 0600 sharp, carts rolling across Deck 9. Guests were scheduled for an onshore excursion, which meant rapid turnover for cabins hosting afternoon arrivals. Maria handed Isabella a clipboard. "You're handling 914 through 920 today. I'll check after." "Alone?" Isabella asked. Maria's eyebrow lifted. "You wanted experience." Isabella nodded once. "I'll manage." The first 3 cabins went smoothly. Beds stripped and remade with crisp corners. Bathrooms sanitized. Glass polished to a flawless shine. But when she entered cabin 917, she paused. A metallic case sat near the closet, larger than typical luggage. Matte black, no brand label, heavy-duty latches. It wasn't unusual for wealthy guests to carry specialty equipment, cameras, instruments, business gear. But this case felt industrial. She reminded herself not to jump to conclusions. She moved around it, finishing the cleaning process quickly. As she vacuumed near the case, the machine cord snagged against one of its handles. The case shifted, just slightly, but enough for her to notice the weight distribution. It was far heavier than clothing would account for. A chill crept along her spine. Before she could examine it further, a sharp knock hit the open doorframe. "Housekeeping," she called automatically. A tall security officer stood there, expression unreadable. "Finish quickly," he said. "This cabin is restricted for staff entry after turnover." "Restricted?" Isabella asked carefully. "Private booking." She nodded, lowering her gaze. "Yes, sir." The security officer's eyes lingered a fraction longer than necessary before he turned and walked away. Isabella finished the cabin in silence, her thoughts racing. Restricted cabins were not standard practice. VIP guests received privacy, yes, but not restricted housekeeping access after cleaning. She exited and made a mental note of the room number. That afternoon, while retrieving fresh linens from storage, Isabella overheard hushed voices near the cargo access corridor, a hallway rarely used by housekeeping. She slowed her steps. "Schedule changed," one voice murmured. "Captain's orders," another replied. "We can't keep adjusting manifests like this." "Then don't question it." The first voice lowered further. "It's not just paperwork." Customs flagged the last shipment. A heavy silence followed. Isabella's heart thudded. Shipment? This wasn't a cargo vessel. It was a luxury cruise liner. While ships did carry supplies, food, beverages, maintenance equipment, manifests were tightly regulated. She shifted slightly to hear better. "We dock in Barcelona in 48 hours, the second voice said. "Transfer happens then. No delays." Footsteps approached. Isabella quickly pushed her linen cart forward, pretending to struggle with its wheel. 2 men in officer uniforms rounded the corner. They barely glanced at her before walking past. Her pulse didn't slow until they disappeared. "Transfer." Customs flagged shipment. "Captain's orders." The cracks were widening. Later that evening, exhaustion pulled at her limbs as she sat in the crew mess hall. The overhead lights hummed faintly, casting everything in pale yellow. Matteo slid into the seat across from her again. "You look like you're thinking too hard," he said lightly. She forced a smile. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who spends all day listening to machines. You've got the same look they do before something breaks." She hesitated. "How much authority does the captain have over cargo?" she asked casually. Matteo's expression shifted slightly. "Depends." "On what?" "On what you're really asking." She lowered her voice. "I overheard something about manifest changes." Matteo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Bella," he said quietly. "Below deck rule number 1. Don't react," she replied automatically. "Close," he said. "Don't dig." She held his gaze. "Why?" He looked around briefly to ensure no one was listening. "Because ships have hierarchies for a reason. And when paperwork shifts without explanation, it's usually above our pay grade." "That doesn't answer the question." His eyes met hers more directly now. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "it's safer not to know." That unsettled her more than anything else. Matteo wasn't fearful by nature. She had noticed his steady confidence. For him to choose caution deliberately meant something real. "You've noticed things too," she said softly. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's port prep." And he walked away. The following day brought new tension. Word spread quickly that Karim, the steward humiliated earlier in the week, had been reassigned. "Reassigned where?" Isabella asked Maria quietly while restocking towels. Maria's lips pressed thin. Off the ship. But we haven't docked. Helicopter transfer. Isabella's stomach dropped. Why? Maria didn't look at her. Performance issues. That doesn't make sense. Maria finally turned, her voice low. Nothing down here makes sense if you ask too many questions. Isabella's chest tightened. Helicopter transfers were expensive. They weren't used lightly, certainly not for minor inventory errors. Kareem had looked embarrassed. Not criminal. As she pushed her cart toward the elevator, she felt eyes on her. She glanced back. Captain Edward Hawthorne stood at the far end of the corridor, speaking with two senior officers. His posture was immaculate, uniform crisp, expression controlled. But his gaze, it lingered. Not warmly, not politely, assessing. Isabella looked away immediately and stepped into the elevator. Inside the small space, her pulse hammered. Had she drawn attention? Had someone noticed her listening near the cargo corridor? She steadied her breathing. You're Bella Santos. Just another crew member. Invisible. But when the elevator doors opened, she nearly collided with Gerald Hawthorne, the board member who had questioned her discipline at the gala. He blinked in surprise at seeing a housekeeping staff member so close. Watch where you're going, he muttered irritably. Yes, sir, Isabella replied softly, lowering her gaze. He stepped past her without another glance. But her mind spun. Gerald Hawthorne, Captain Edward Hawthorne, the same surname. Her heart skipped. Coincidence? Or connection? That night, unable to sleep, Isabella slipped quietly from her bunk and walked toward the lower maintenance level. The corridors were dim, lit only by emergency lighting strips. She wasn't reckless, but she needed clarity. Near the cargo storage bay, she crouched beside stacked supply crates. Most were clearly labeled food inventory, linens, maintenance parts. But at the far corner, partially concealed behind a movable barrier, sat several large black containers. No logos, no shipping labels, no manifest stickers. Her pulse quickened. She stepped closer. The containers were identical in size to the case she'd seen in cabin 917. A faint chemical smell lingered in the air, sharp, synthetic. Footsteps echoed suddenly from the hallway. Isabella ducked behind the barrier just as two figures entered the storage bay. Barcelona dockside crew confirmed, one voice said. Payments already cleared, the other replied. Captain wants no errors this time. And customs? Handled. Isabella's breath slowed deliberately, controlling the panic rising in her chest. Handled? One of the men laughed quietly. You worry too much. A metal latch clicked open. Even from her hidden position, Isabella heard the unmistakable sound of vacuum-sealed packaging shifting inside. Powder sliding against plastic. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't undocumented cargo. This was contraband. And it wasn't small-scale. Close it, the second man said. Transfer in 48 hours. Footsteps retreated. The storage bay fell silent again. Isabella remained still for several seconds before slowly rising. Her mind raced faster than her pulse now. Drugs. On her father's ship. Under the authority of its captain. Her father had spent decades building a legitimate empire. One scandal of this magnitude could destroy everything. Reputationally, legally, financially. Worse, passengers were unknowingly sailing on a vessel being used for trafficking. Her chest tightened with anger. And something else. Fear. Because if this operation ran as smoothly as it sounded, it had been happening for a while. Which meant layers of complicity. Layers of silence. She stepped back from the crates carefully, memorizing their placement, the corridor angles, the access points. Above her, somewhere in a penthouse suite, wealthy guests were sipping aged whiskey, unaware. Below her, criminal activity moved under fluorescent lights. The golden deck gleamed, but beneath it rot was spreading. As Isabella turned to leave, a voice echoed from the entrance. You shouldn't be down here. She froze. Captain Edward Hawthorne stood at the doorway, hands clasped behind his back. His expression was calm. Too calm. Isabella lowered her eyes immediately. I was looking for extra disinfectant, sir. At midnight. Her mind worked quickly. Supply request was short today. He studied her in silence, gaze sharp and probing. For a moment, she felt exposed. Not as Bella Santos, but as Isabella Delano. Then he stepped aside. Return to your quarters, he said smoothly. Restricted areas are not for housekeeping. Yes, sir. She walked past him steadily, refusing to rush. But as she turned the corner, she felt it again. That lingering gaze. The cracks were no longer subtle. Something dark was embedded within this ship. And now she knew it. The question was no longer whether corruption existed. It was how deep it ran, and whether the captain already suspected that Bella Santos was far more dangerous than she appeared. Isabella did not go back to sleep after that encounter. She lay on her narrow bunk staring at the metal ceiling, listening to the hum of the engines and replaying every second in the storage bay. The black containers, the vacuum-sealed packaging, the words, "Transfer in 48 hours," and the captain's voice behind her in the dark. "You shouldn't be down here." It hadn't been shouted. It had been measured, which was worse. Measured meant controlled. Controlled meant confident. And confident men running illegal operations were dangerous. She turned onto her side, exhaling slowly. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. Drugs were being transported aboard the Sovereign Star. Her father's flagship. Her inheritance. And unless she was very careful, she would be swallowed by it before she could expose it. The next morning, everything looked the same. That was the most unsettling part. Guests laughed at breakfast buffets. Children splashed in the rooftop pool. A violinist played near the atrium staircase. Crew members rushed through their duties. Luxury shimmered without interruption. Only Isabella carried the knowledge that beneath the polished marble floors, something poisonous moved quietly toward the next port. Maria handed her a fresh assignment sheet. "Deck 10 today." Isabella nodded. Yes. Her voice sounded steady. She was proud of that. If the captain had suspected anything the night before, he hadn't acted on it. That meant one of two things. Either he believed her excuse, or he was watching. As she pushed her cart into the service elevator, she noticed a subtle change. 2 additional security officers stationed near the cargo access hallway. New placement. Her stomach tightened. Had they increased patrols because of customs flags? Or because of her? She kept her gaze forward. Invisible. Always invisible. Midway through her shift, Isabella found herself assigned to cabin 917 again. The restricted one. Her pulse quickened. The metallic case was gone. But something else caught her attention. Faint white residue near the closet baseboard. Almost invisible against the cream carpeting. She crouched carefully, pretending to wipe the area. The residue wasn't dust. It was fine. Powdered. Her fingers hovered just above it. She didn't touch it directly, too risky. Instead, she folded a tissue discreetly and dabbed the edge of the residue, pressing it into the paper. The powder clung. She slipped the folded tissue into the inner seam of her apron pocket, heart racing. It was a small sample, but if it tested positive for narcotics, it was evidence. Her father had emergency legal protocols for crisis management, secure labs, offshore compliance teams. She just needed proof solid enough to trigger them. A shadow darkened the doorway. She turned calmly. Captain Hawthorne stood there. Again. His timing felt deliberate now. "Efficient," he observed coolly, glancing around the pristine suite. "Thank you, sir," she replied. He stepped inside slowly, boots silent against the carpet. "Have you adjusted well to ship life, miss?" "Santos," she supplied quietly. "Yes, Santos." His eyes lingered. "Crew quarters are not luxurious." "I manage." "I'm sure you do." The air felt heavier with each word. He moved closer to the closet, standing precisely where the residue had been moments before. "Some areas of the ship," he said evenly, "are off-limits to certain departments. I understand. Curiosity can create misunderstandings." Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. "I don't go where I'm not assigned," she replied carefully. His gaze sharpened. For a fraction of a second, something flashed behind his composed expression. Calculation. Then he smiled. A thin, controlled curve of his lips. "Good," he said softly. "We value disciplined crew." He turned and walked out. Isabella didn't breathe until his footsteps faded. This was no longer coincidence. He was checking on her. At lunch, she found Mateo in the far corner of the mess hall, staring into his tray without eating. She slid into the seat across from him. "You okay?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Engineering's been restricted from cargo-level access." "Since when?" "Last night." Her pulse jumped. "Reason?" "Maintenance rerouting," he said flatly. "That's what they told us." "And you believe that?" He gave her a look. "No." Silence settled between them. She leaned forward slightly. Matteo, if something illegal was happening on this ship. His head snapped up. Lower your voice, he muttered. She obeyed immediately. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. Bella, don't. Don't what? Don't get involved in things you can't control. Her voice softened. What if it affects all of us? It already does, he replied bitterly. But the people at the top always land safely. The words hit her harder than he knew. If he discovered who she really was, would he place her among the people at the top? She swallowed that thought. I just want to understand, she said. He studied her carefully. You're different, he said finally. Her chest tightened. Different how? You ask questions like you have something to prove. She forced a small smile. Maybe I do. His gaze softened slightly. Just be careful. The way he said it wasn't dismissive. It was protective. And that terrified her. Because if she pushed this too far, she wouldn't be the only one at risk. That evening, Isabella waited until shift change chaos created distraction before returning to the lower maintenance corridor. She moved deliberately this time, counting steps, memorizing camera placements, tracking security rotations. Her business training clicked into place. Observe patterns. Identify weaknesses. Exploit timing. The storage bay was quieter than before. The black containers remained in the far corner. She approached cautiously. This time, she brought something with her. A small magnetic inspection mirror used by housekeeping for checking under furniture. She crouched near the crate's base and angled the mirror beneath it. A label had been partially peeled off. But not completely. She leaned closer. Under the scraped surface, faint lettering remained. A pharmaceutical company name. But the production code didn't match any legitimate medication she recognized. Her pulse surged. Counterfeit pharmaceuticals? Or repackaged narcotics? Either way, illegal. She snapped a quick photo with the concealed device her father had insisted she carry, the one disguised as a basic crew phone. The click was silent. Footsteps echoed in the distance. She froze. 2 men entered, neither in full officer uniform this time. Cargo handlers. Customs inspection reduced, one said. Captain paid extra. Paid extra. Bribery. Isabella's stomach twisted. The second man nudged one of the containers with his boot. Next shipment doubles. High demand. Risks worth it. Her breathing slowed into controlled rhythm. She needed more. Evidence of scale. Evidence of command. Proof linking the captain directly. When the men exited, she stepped closer to the crate and ran her fingers along the edge until she felt a slight indentation. A hidden latch. Her heart thundered. She hesitated only a second before pressing it. The crate lid shifted slightly open. Inside, rose dozens of vacuum-sealed packages stacked tightly. White powder compressed in brick form. She didn't need a chemistry degree to recognize distribution-level narcotics. Her father's ship was a trafficking vessel. Not accidentally. Systematically. The latch clicked softly as she closed it again. A wave of anger flooded her chest. Hot and sharp. This wasn't just about profit. This endangered passengers, crew, the entire company. If law enforcement intercepted the ship mid-route, everyone aboard could face investigation. The scandal would be catastrophic. And the captain had been bold enough to run this operation on the flagship, which meant he believed himself untouchable. A cold realization crept in. If Gerald Hawthorne, the board member, was related to the captain, if family influence extended upward, this wasn't just a rogue officer. This might be protected corruption. Isabella stepped back slowly. Her mind shifted into strategy mode. Step 1. Secure evidence. Step 2. Verify substance. Step 3. Contact her father through encrypted protocol. But timing mattered. If she alerted him too soon and he acted without airtight proof, the captain could destroy records. Or worse, make someone disappear. Like Kareem. Her throat tightened. Kareem hadn't been transferred for performance. He had probably seen something. And now he was gone. The ship vibrated faintly beneath her feet as it cut through dark waters. Barcelona in 48 hours. Transfer scheduled. She had less than 2 days to move carefully. As she turned to leave the storage bay, a soft voice echoed behind her. Bella? She spun around. Matteo stood in the doorway. His eyes shifted from her face to the crates behind her. Silence stretched. What are you doing here? He asked slowly. Her mind raced. The truth trembled on her tongue. But she couldn't tell him everything. Not yet. She started, then steadied herself. I followed something that didn't make sense. His gaze sharpened. You shouldn't be here. I know. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. This level is being monitored. Since when? Since yesterday. Her pulse spiked. Then why are you here? Because engineering was rerouted for a reason, he said quietly. And I don't like not knowing why. Their eyes met. Shared suspicion. Shared risk. The air felt charged. He glanced at the crates again. You saw it, he said. It wasn't a question. She nodded once. His jaw tightened. Bella, he murmured. This isn't small. I know. People get hurt over things like this. Her voice softened. What if we do nothing? He didn't answer. Because they both knew. If the operation continued unchecked, the consequences would only grow. Sirens from above deck echoed faintly, rehearsal alarms for passengers. Life carried on. Ignorant. Matteo stepped closer still, lowering his voice to barely a whisper. If you're going to do something, he said, don't do it alone. Her heart stuttered. Trust. Dangerous. Powerful. Unexpected. She swallowed. This ship deserves better, she said quietly. His eyes held hers. So do you. The words landed gently but deeply. For a moment, the weight of the situation softened into something else. Connection. But reality surged back in quickly. Barcelona. 48 hours. A captain who might already suspect her. A trafficking ring embedded within the golden decks of her father's empire. Isabella straightened. This was no longer about proving herself as CEO. This was about survival. And justice. She looked at Matteo, truly looked at him. If we move, she said carefully, we move smart. He nodded once. And in the dim fluorescent glow of the storage bay, beneath a luxury liner slicing through black waters, an alliance was quietly formed. The hidden cargo was no longer hidden from her. Now the real question was whether she could expose it without becoming the next person who vanished at sea. The sea was calm the next morning. Deceptively calm. Sunlight poured across the upper decks in warm gold, guests stretching lazily on lounge chairs, as if the world held no secrets beneath them. A jazz trio played near the infinity pool. Champagne corks popped. Laughter carried easily across open air. Below deck, tension coiled like wire pulled too tight. Isabella felt it the moment she stepped into the corridor. Security presence had doubled. Cargo-level access remained restricted. And Captain Hawthorne had begun appearing in places he never used to. Housekeeping hallways, crew stairwells, maintenance intersections. Watching. Always watching. She kept her movements measured. Predictable. Ordinary. Bella Santos. Just another crew member earning her contract. But inside, Isabella Delano was calculating every second. Barcelona was now less than 36 hours away. The transfer would happen at dockside, which meant this was the last full day the drugs would remain on board. She needed more proof. Something undeniable. Something that connected the captain directly. And yet, as much as strategy filled her mind, another presence tugged gently at her thoughts. Matteo. She found him that evening on the lower aft deck. A narrow, semi-restricted space crew used when they needed air away from guests. The sky was painted deep indigo, horizon bleeding into darkness. Wind tugged at her uniform as she stepped outside. Matteo stood at the rail, forearms resting on cold metal, staring out at the endless water. You look like you're fighting ghosts, he said without turning. She stepped beside him. Maybe I am. He glanced at her then, eyes steady, searching. You didn't sleep. Neither did you. He huffed softly. Engine vibrations were off by 0.02%. They adjusted ballast weight. Why? Cargo shift. Her stomach tightened. So it's moving. Yeah. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with understanding. The ocean wind wrapped around them, carrying salt and distance. You don't belong down here, he said quietly. The words hit her like a quiet accusation. What makes you say that? She asked carefully. You observe too much, he replied. You don't complain. You don't gossip. You don't treat this like a paycheck. She swallowed. You talk like you've known me longer than a week. Some people are easy to read, he said. You're not. She looked out at the water instead of at him. That a bad thing? He shook his head slowly. It means you're carrying something. She almost laughed at the understatement. The truth pressed at her ribs. The identity she was hiding. The empire she was protecting. The danger circling them. But she couldn't tell him. Not yet. I just don't like injustice, she said finally. Matteo studied her profile in the dim deck light. Neither do I, he murmured. The wind lifted a loose strand of her hair, and without thinking, he reached out to tuck it back behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, careful. Her breath caught. No one had touched her like that in a long time, not with softness, not without hesitation or calculation. She was used to polite interest at galas, strategic flirtation, men drawn to her father's name, not her laugh. This felt different, unpolished, real. You're shaking, he said quietly. Cold, she lied. He didn't challenge it. Instead, he shrugged off his light jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It smells like engine oil, he warned lightly. She smiled faintly. Better than cleaning chemicals. Their eyes met. The air shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was slow, intentional, like something blooming in shadow. You know this is dangerous, he said softly. Her heart skipped. Standing on a deck? Getting involved, he clarified. With what? With whatever you're planning. She didn't answer immediately. The truth was, she hadn't meant to pull him into this. She had meant to protect him from it. But somehow, in the quiet spaces between shifts and stolen glances, he had become part of her thinking. You could walk away, she said gently. From the ship. From me. He stepped closer instead. That wasn't an option, he said simply. Her chest tightened. Why? She asked, voice barely above the wind. He held her gaze steadily. Because you make this place feel less small. The words landed somewhere deep. No grand declarations. No rehearsed lines. Just honesty. And for a moment, the weight of cargo manifests and corruption faded behind something warmer. She stepped closer. He hesitated just a fraction, giving her space to pull back. She didn't. Their first kiss wasn't polished. It wasn't choreographed. It was soft, almost unsure at first. But when she exhaled against him, something steadied. His hands settled carefully at her waist, respectful, grounding. The world beyond that deck disappeared. No captain, no drugs, no inheritance. Just two people who had found something unexpected in the middle of steel corridors and fluorescent lights. When they finally pulled apart, her pulse was wild. Matteo rested his forehead lightly against hers. Your trouble, he murmured. She almost laughed. You have no idea. His thumb brushed her cheek gently. Whatever you're facing, he said, voice low. Don't shut me out. She wanted to promise. But promises felt dangerous right now. Instead, she nodded. And for a brief, fragile moment that was enough. The illusion shattered the next morning. A crew-wide notice came through at breakfast. Mandatory meeting. All service departments. Captain Hawthorne would be addressing operational adjustments. Isabella's pulse ticked upward immediately. Operational adjustments meant movement. The crew gathered in the lower briefing hall, rows of folding chairs under harsh lighting. Captain Hawthorne stepped onto the small platform at the front, posture immaculate as ever. His voice carried smoothly. As we approach Barcelona, we will undergo enhanced port security inspection. All departments are to comply with new procedural restrictions. Isabella's gaze sharpened. Cargo access will remain limited, he continued. Engineering, housekeeping, and maintenance personnel are not to enter restricted storage corridors without direct authorization. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Matteo shifted beside her. The captain's eyes scanned the crowd slowly. For a split second, barely perceptible, they paused on her, then moved on. If anyone is found violating protocol, he said evenly, disciplinary action will be immediate. Silence fell thickly. The message was clear. He knew someone was watching, and he intended to tighten control. As the meeting dismissed, Isabella's mind moved rapidly. He was accelerating the timeline. The transfer would likely happen quickly at dock, minimal window. She had less time than she thought. Matteo touched her elbow lightly as the crowd dispersed. He's nervous, he murmured. Or confident, she replied quietly. Confident people don't tighten restrictions, he said. They assume no one's looking. She considered that. Maybe the captain didn't know who she was. But he knew someone was asking questions. That someone was her. As they stepped back into the corridor, she felt the weight of what lay ahead pressing hard. If she contacted her father now, authorities could be waiting at port. But that meant exposing herself. Exposing everything. And putting Matteo in the blast radius. She glanced at him. He walked beside her calmly, unaware of how deeply intertwined their futures had just become. Love, she realized, was inconvenient. Complicated decisions. It made risks heavier. But it also strengthened resolve. Because now this wasn't just about an empire. It was about protecting someone who believed in her, without knowing who she truly was. That night, she stood alone again at the rail. The city lights of Barcelona shimmered faintly in the far distance. The transfer would happen soon. The captain would make his move. And she would have to decide when to reveal her own. The sea stretched endless before her. Dark, patient, powerful. Behind her, inside the steel heart of the ship, illegal cargo waited. Beside her, love had begun quietly in the shadows. And Isabella understood something with sudden clarity. If she exposed the truth, everything would change. Her disguise, her relationship, her safety. But if she didn't, the rot would spread. And she would never deserve to lead the empire her father built. The ship cut forward through black water. Barcelona waited. So did the storm. Barcelona rose from the horizon like a promise. Golden light stretched across the water as the Sovereign Star glided toward port, her white hull gleaming against the early morning sun. From the upper decks, guests gathered along the rails, cameras lifted, sunglasses on, excitement buzzing through the air. Land at last. I've booked the cathedral tour. Tapas and wine all day. Laughter, anticipation, luxury. Below deck, silence felt heavier than steel. Isabella stood in the crew corridor watching the digital clock tick down toward docking clearance. Every minute felt amplified. Transfer day. She had made her decision at 3:12 a.m. After pacing the narrow length of her cabin for nearly an hour, she had activated the secure protocol embedded in her concealed device. A coded sequence only 3 people in the entire company knew how to receive. Her father, his chief legal officer, and the private compliance investigator who had built Delano Maritime's crisis response framework. The message had been brief, precise, evidence confirmed. Trafficking operation aboard flagship. Captain implicated. Docking Barcelona. Act at port. Secure customs and federal liaison. Discreet. She hadn't signed it. She didn't need to. The encryption signature alone would tell her father everything. He would not panic. He would not rage. Victor Delano would move like he always had, strategically, which meant authorities would be waiting. But until that moment came, she was alone inside the storm. Docking procedures began at 0800. The ship slowed, engines shifting tone as tugboats maneuvered her toward berth. Crew lined up for inspection protocols. Security teams circulated more aggressively than usual. Isabella noticed something else. Captain Hawthorne had not made his usual public docking announcement. Instead, the cruise director handled it, which meant the captain was busy. Her pulse tightened. Housekeeping Team B, stand by, Maria called. Guest disembarkation begins in 30. Isabella pushed her cart toward the designated waiting zone. As she passed the cargo corridor, she saw it. The black containers were no longer stacked in the far corner. They had been moved closer to the port access hatch. Faster transfer. Minimal exposure. The trap was tightening on both sides. Matteo found her near the service elevator just as the first wave of guests exited the ship. They're accelerating, he said quietly. I know. Cargo crew from dockside arrived early. That never happens. Her jaw clenched. How many? She asked. 4 on manifest. 8 showed up. Her stomach turned. Double coverage meant they expected interference. Or they feared it. Matteo stepped closer, lowering his voice further. Bella. If something happens today. Her eyes met his. Stay out of it, she finished softly. I won't. Her chest tightened. You have to. He shook his head. You think I don't see it? The way you move? The way you watch everything? A flicker of fear passed through her. Matteo. You're not just a housekeeper. Silence. The words hung between them, heavier than anything spoken before. He searched her face, not accusing, just trying to understand. You don't react like crew, he continued quietly. You think like command. Her heart pounded. This was the moment she had feared. Exposure. But before she could answer, a voice sliced through the corridor. Santos. Both of them turned. Captain Hawthorne stood 10 feet away, flanked by 2 security officers. His expression was calm. Too calm. Report to cargo level immediately, he said. Isabella's blood ran cold. Sir? She replied evenly. Now. Matteo stepped slightly forward. She's assigned to turnover. The captain's eyes flicked to him. And you are. Engineering. Then return to it. The tension in the air felt electric. Isabella forced her shoulders to remain loose. Yes, sir, she said quietly. As she followed the captain toward the lower level, she felt Matteo's gaze burning into her back. The cargo bay doors shut behind them with a heavy metallic echo. The black containers sat aligned near the port hatch. Dockside workers waited beyond the partially open loading gate. Captain Hawthorne turned slowly to face her. No security officers now. Just him. And her. You're persistent, he said mildly. I don't understand, sir. He smiled faintly. You were in this corridor 3 nights ago. And again yesterday. Her pulse hammered. I was retrieving supplies. You're a poor liar. The air thickened. He stepped closer, hands clasped behind his back. Do you know what I find interesting about you, Miss Santos? He asked softly. She didn't respond. You don't flinch. Her silence stretched. You observe, he continued. You memorize. You ask questions carefully. He tilted his head slightly. You're educated. It wasn't a compliment. It was an accusation. Her mind raced through options. Deny. Deflect. Play small. Some of us value our jobs, she said quietly. He chuckled, low and humorless. Let's stop pretending. The words landed like a blade. You're not here for linens, he said. Her throat tightened. What are you implying? I'm implying, he said calmly, that you have been gathering information. Her heart slammed against her ribs. If he knew, if he had proof. He stepped closer still, lowering his voice. You've been very careful, he admitted. But not careful enough. Her mind sharpened instantly. He suspected. But he didn't know everything. You're intelligent, he continued. Which makes this unfortunate. A chill slid down her spine. Unfortunate? She repeated. Yes. He gestured toward the open loading hatch. Because accidents happen at ports. Cargo shifts. Crew fall. Her pulse roared in her ears. Threat. Direct. Cold. You would risk that? She asked evenly. His eyes hardened. For millions, he said softly. Absolutely. The dockside workers began moving the first container toward the hatch. Time was collapsing. Her father had to be close. Had to be. She inhaled slowly. You think this ship belongs to you? She said quietly. His lips curved slightly. It runs because of me. No, she replied, voice steady now. It runs despite you. Something flickered in his expression. Annoyance. You don't know who you're challenging. Her gaze locked with his. Oh, she said softly. I do. The sound of boots echoed from the corridor behind them. Heavy. Coordinated. The captain's head turned sharply. The cargo bay doors burst open. Uniformed authorities flooded in. Spanish federal officers accompanied by international maritime enforcement. Weapons drawn. Voices commanding. Captain Edward Hawthorne. Step away from the cargo. Shock flashed across his face for the first time. Real shock. His gaze snapped back to Isabella. And in that split second, understanding dawned. You, he breathed. Her voice was calm now. No longer small. No longer hidden. It's over. Security officers seized the containers, slicing open one of the vacuum-sealed packages. White powder spilled under fluorescent light. An officer turned to the captain. You are under arrest for trafficking and customs fraud. Handcuffs snapped around his wrists. Chaos erupted across the dockside. Crew members gathered at corridor entrances. Confusion spreading rapidly. Isabella stepped back as authorities moved past her. Her pulse trembled, not from fear. From release. It had worked. Her father had moved swiftly. Strategically. She stepped into the corridor just as Matteo pushed through the crowd. His eyes searched frantically until they found her. You're okay, he breathed. She nodded once. Behind them, Captain Hawthorne was escorted past in cuffs. As he passed her, he leaned slightly closer. This isn't finished, he murmured. But his voice lacked the earlier confidence. Because power had shifted. Completely. Matteo stared at the scene unfolding. What is happening? He asked. Isabella met his eyes. The moment she had been avoiding stood in front of her now. Truth. Exposure. Choice. She swallowed slowly. This ship, she said quietly, was never his. Matteo's brow furrowed. And then, from the far end of the corridor, another familiar figure appeared. Victor Delano stepped aboard from the dockside, flanked by legal counsel and enforcement officials. The crew gasped. Shock rippled visibly. Matteo's gaze shifted from Victor to Isabella, back to Victor, and something in his expression changed. Understanding. Slow. Devastating. Isabella felt her disguise fall away without a single word spoken. The trap had closed. The captain was arrested. The cargo seized. The empire protected. But as Matteo stepped back slightly, eyes no longer seeing Bella Santos, she realized the storm wasn't over. It had only changed direction. Silence does not fall all at once. It spreads. From the cargo bay outward, like ink spilling into water. Crew members gathered in clusters along the corridor, whispering in multiple languages. Dockside officials moved with controlled urgency, photographing evidence, sealing containers, escorting officers through restricted areas. And at the center of it all, Isabella stood still. Matteo stood 3 feet away from her, but it felt like an ocean had opened between them. Victor Delano's polished shoes echoed against the metal floor as he approached. He wore a navy suit instead of his usual cruise attire, expression carved from steel. He didn't look surprised. He looked prepared. His eyes found hers. No words passed between them. They didn't need to. She had sent the signal. He had answered it. Behind him, legal counsel spoke rapidly with Spanish federal authorities. Evidence was being catalogued. The black containers were opened fully now. Brick after brick of vacuum-sealed narcotics stacked under harsh fluorescent light. Gasps rippled through the gathered crew. Matteo's voice was low, disbelieving. "You knew." Isabella turned slowly toward him. She no longer looked like Bella Santos. She stood straighter now, shoulders squared, eyes steady. "Yes," she said quietly. His jaw tightened. "Since when?" "Since before Barcelona." His breath left him sharply. "You were investigating." "Yes." He searched her face, and something fragile cracked in his expression. "Who are you?" he asked. The question wasn't angry. It was wounded. Victor stepped closer then, his presence commanding attention even without speaking. Several crew members instinctively stepped back. Matteo looked between them, and the truth assembled itself in his mind piece by piece. The way she observed, the way officers hesitated around her, the way the captain had singled her out. "You're not housekeeping," he said slowly. Isabella inhaled. "No." Silence pressed in. "My name," she said softly, "is Isabella Delano." The corridor seemed to hold its breath. Matteo stared at her as if she had shifted into someone else entirely. "Delano?" he repeated. Victor's voice entered, calm but resonant. "My daughter." The word settled heavily in the air. Crew members murmured openly now. "The owner's daughter." Working below deck, Matteo stepped back a fraction, as though recalibrating distance. "You're the heir," he said. "Yes. And you?" His voice faltered. "You let me believe." "I didn't lie about who I am," she said quickly. "I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing," he replied quietly. The truth of it cut deeper than accusation. Behind them, Captain Hawthorne was being escorted down the corridor in handcuffs. His uniform no longer looked powerful, just theatrical. He paused briefly when passing Victor. "You built this empire blind," he said coolly. Victor's voice was measured. "No. I built it trusting the wrong man." The captain's gaze slid to Isabella. "You play a dangerous game," he murmured. "It wasn't a game," she replied evenly. He held her gaze a moment longer. Then officers pulled him forward and out of sight. The ship felt different already, like a weight had shifted. Victor turned fully to Isabella. "You're not hurt?" he asked quietly. "No." "Did he threaten you?" "Yes." His jaw tightened, but his tone remained controlled. "That ends now." Matteo watched the exchange carefully, power dynamics rearranging in front of him. Isabella looked at him again. "I needed proof," she said softly. "If I'd reported suspicion without evidence, he would have destroyed everything. Or worse." "Kareem," Matteo said quietly. "Yes." Understanding darkened his expression. "And you were gathering it," he said. "Yes." "You put yourself in danger." She held his gaze. "So did you." Silence. Victor observed them both. "Perception sharp, you assisted her?" he asked Matteo calmly. Matteo straightened slightly. "I didn't know who she was." "That wasn't my question." Matteo hesitated. "Yes," he admitted. Victor studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Thank you." It was simple, but genuine. The tension eased a fraction. Authorities continued moving cargo and sealing evidence. A port official approached Victor with documentation. "This will be a high-profile case," the official said. "Media inquiries are already beginning." Victor nodded. "Passengers are to remain unaware until we disembark them safely." The official agreed and moved on. Isabella stepped slightly aside, the adrenaline beginning to ebb. Her hands trembled faintly now that the immediate threat had passed. Matteo noticed. He hesitated only a second before stepping closer. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Yes," but her voice wavered just enough. He didn't touch her this time. Not because he didn't want to, because he wasn't sure he was allowed to. That distance hurt more than she expected. Victor finished with authorities and turned back to her. "This will escalate quickly," he said. "Board members will demand explanations. Investors will panic. I know. You'll need to stand beside me publicly." She met his gaze steadily. "I will." He studied her for a moment, then something shifted in his expression. Pride. "You handled this exactly as I would have," he said quietly. She swallowed. "That was the goal." He gave a faint nod. "Then let's finish it." By late afternoon, an emergency internal briefing was called in the main crew hall. All departments assembled. Whispers filled the space before Victor stepped onto the platform. Isabella stood beside him. No uniform now. She had changed into a simple navy dress from the small executive wardrobe kept for emergencies. The transformation was undeniable. Crew members stared openly. Maria's eyes widened in shock. Matteo stood near the back, arms crossed loosely, expression unreadable. Victor addressed the room first. "Earlier today," he began, voice firm but controlled, "a criminal operation was uncovered aboard this vessel. The captain has been arrested. The narcotics discovered will be processed through international law enforcement." Murmurs rippled through the hall. "This operation was not sanctioned by Delano Maritime," he continued. "It was concealed." His gaze shifted briefly to Isabella. "And it was uncovered by someone who chose to understand this ship from within." He stepped aside. Isabella felt every pair of eyes in the room settle on her. She inhaled slowly. "My name is Isabella Delano," she said clearly. Gasps again, though softer this time. "I have been working among you this past week under the name Bella Santos." The hall exploded into whispers. Maria's mouth fell slightly open. Matteo didn't move. "I did this," Isabella continued, "because I will soon lead this company." Silence fell again. "And I refuse to lead it from ignorance." Her voice strengthened. "I saw how hard you work. I saw the hours, the pressure, the fear." She paused deliberately. "No one should fear leadership." The words hung heavily. "This ship runs because of you," she said. "Not because of titles." She didn't look at her father when she said it. She looked at the crew. "And if I am to earn the right to lead you," she continued, "it will be through transparency and accountability." Her eyes found Matteo briefly. "I cannot undo what was hidden," she said quietly. "But I can promise it will not happen again." Silence lingered. Then slowly, Maria began clapping, tentative at first. Then others joined. The sound built gradually, not thunderous, but real. Matteo didn't clap. He watched her, measuring, processing. When the meeting dismissed, crew members approached cautiously, some with gratitude, others with curiosity. Maria reached her first. "You scrubbed floors with me?" she said, almost incredulous. "Yes." Maria shook her head in disbelief. "You were terrible at first," she added bluntly. Isabella laughed softly. "I know." Maria's expression softened. "Thank you," she said simply. Then she walked away. One by one the crew dispersed, until only Matteo remained. They stood facing each other in the now quiet hall. "You should have told me," he said. "I couldn't. You didn't trust me." Her throat tightened. "I was protecting you." He exhaled slowly. "From what?" "From becoming collateral." Silence. He stepped closer now, not distant anymore. "But I chose to stand with you anyway," he said quietly. "Yes." His eyes searched hers. "You're not just the owner's daughter," he said slowly. "You're the woman who cleaned cabins until her hands hurt." "And you're not just engineering crew," she replied. "You're the man who didn't walk away." A faint, reluctant smile touched his lips. "This is complicated," he said. "Yes." "You're about to become CEO." "Yes." "And I'm—" He didn't finish. She stepped closer. "You're the reason I remembered why this company matters," she said softly. The air between them felt different now. No longer shadowed, just uncertain. He reached for her hand, hesitated only briefly, then held it. Not hidden, not secret, just honest. "You're still trouble," he murmured. She smiled faintly. "Now you know how much." Outside, sirens faded into distance as authorities completed their work. The ship stood docked in Barcelona, its scandal contained, its corruption exposed. But inside its steel frame something else had shifted. Isabella Delano was no longer invisible. The Empire knew her name, and now, she would have to prove she deserved it. Scandal does not wait politely. It detonates. By nightfall, Barcelona's port was lined with satellite vans. News anchors spoke urgently into cameras with the sovereign star glowing behind them like a guilty monument. Headlines spread faster than the ship's wake. Luxury cruise liner linked to drug trafficking ring. Captain arrested in international operation. Delano Maritime under investigation. Isabella stood in the executive lounge overlooking the harbor, watching the flashing lights reflect against the water. Her father stood a few feet away on a call with legal counsel. "Full cooperation," Victor said firmly. "All internal records released. Immediate audit of all fleet captains. Suspend Gerald Hawthorne pending review." Pause. "No, not recommend. Suspend." He ended the call and exhaled slowly. "This will get worse before it gets better," he said without turning. "I know," Isabella replied. He faced her then. "You did the right thing." She nodded, but her chest felt heavy. "Some of them won't see it that way." Victor's expression hardened slightly. "Board members who value optics over integrity can step aside. It's not the board I'm worried about." He studied her carefully. "Mateo," he said quietly. She didn't deny it. "He looked at me like I was someone else," she admitted. "You are someone else. That's the problem." Victor crossed the room slowly, resting his hands on the back of a chair. "Leadership isolates," he said. "It always has. I don't want isolation. Then you must build bridges strong enough to hold power." She absorbed that in silence. A knock interrupted them. Legal counsel entered briskly. "Authorities need a joint statement within the hour. Media pressure is intensifying." Victor nodded. "Prepare the draft. Isabella and I will review together." The lawyer hesitated slightly. "With respect, sir, are you certain she should be front-facing this early?" Victor's eyes cooled instantly. "She uncovered the operation," he said evenly. "She will stand beside me." The lawyer nodded and left. Isabella felt something steady inside her shift. Not fear. Resolve. Meanwhile, below deck, tension simmered differently. Crew members clustered in mess halls, scrolling through headlines on their phones. "They're saying the entire fleet is compromised. My family's messaging me, asking if I'm safe. They'll shut us down." Mateo leaned against a wall, listening. He wasn't interested in rumors. He was replaying moments. The way she moved through corridors. The confidence she carried during the arrest. The way authority responded to her without question. He had fallen for Bella Santos, not Isabella Delano. Or had he? The question gnawed at him. A junior engineer approached him cautiously. "You knew?" the man asked. Mateo shook his head. "No. But you were with her." "I was." The man hesitated. "So what does that make you?" Mateo didn't answer, because he didn't know. At 9 p.m., Victor and Isabella stood before cameras in the ship's grand atrium. The same space where chandeliers once sparkled during her father's retirement announcement now felt colder under press lights. Reporters lined the perimeter. Microphones extended forward. Victor stepped first. "Delano Maritime condemns the criminal actions uncovered aboard the Sovereign Star. The former captain acted independently and without authorization. We are cooperating fully with international authorities." He gestured to Isabella. "This operation was uncovered by my daughter, Isabella Delano, who chose to investigate ship operations firsthand." Murmurs rippled through the press. Isabella stepped forward. Her voice was calm, measured. "This company was built on trust," she said. "Trust from our passengers. Trust from our crew. That trust was violated." Flashbulbs popped. "We are conducting a full fleet audit," she continued. "New oversight measures will be implemented immediately. Transparency is not optional." A reporter shouted. "Did you suspect your captain before boarding?" "Yes," she replied evenly. Another voice. Why disguise yourself? Because filtered information hides truth. A third. Were you ever in danger? She held the reporter's gaze. Yes. Silence followed. The honesty disarmed them. Victor placed a steadying hand lightly at her back. Together, they concluded the statement and exited under controlled escort. Later that night, Isabella found herself walking alone toward the lower deck. She didn't change clothes. She didn't disguise herself. She walked openly. Some crew members glanced up as she passed. Curiosity replacing familiarity. It hurt more than she expected. When she reached the aft deck, she saw him immediately. Matteo stood at the rail again, staring into darkness. She approached slowly. Mind if I join you? She asked. He didn't turn. You don't need permission anymore. The words were quiet, not cruel, but sharp. She stepped beside him anyway. I never needed it, she said softly. I wanted it. He finally looked at her. You should have trusted me. I wanted to. That's not the same thing. She nodded. I know. Wind whipped across the deck. Below them, harbor water shifted restlessly against the hull. I didn't know how deep it went, she continued. If I told you too early and something went wrong, you thought I'd get hurt. Yes. He studied her expression. You don't get to decide my risks, he said quietly. Her throat tightened. You're right. Silence lingered. You walked into danger alone, he said. No. You could have. Yes. His jaw flexed. You're going to run this entire company. Yes. And I'm just... He stopped himself again. She turned fully toward him. Just what? Engineering crew, he said. She stepped closer. You're the man who stood beside me when I had nothing but suspicion, she said. You're the man who didn't flinch when the captain threatened me. He swallowed. That was before I knew you owned the ship. And now, he held her gaze. Now I don't know where I stand. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something inside her. She reached for his hand. This time he didn't hesitate. I didn't fall for your title, he said quietly. I fell for the woman scrubbing cabins at 6 in the morning. I'm still her. Are you? She didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, she was both. And balancing those identities would be harder than any confrontation with the captain. Footsteps echoed faintly from the stairwell. Victor appeared at the entrance, pausing when he saw them. He didn't interrupt. He simply observed. Then he stepped forward. Matteo, he said calmly. Matteo straightened instinctively. Sir. Victor's gaze was steady but not cold. You assisted my daughter in exposing criminal activity. Yes, sir. You placed yourself at risk. Yes. Victor nodded once. I don't forget loyalty. Matteo hesitated. I didn't do it for loyalty. For what then? Matteo glanced briefly at Isabella. For what was right. Victor's expression shifted subtly. Approval. That, Victor said quietly, is exactly why this company needs people like you. Silence fell. I intend to restructure oversight and crew representation across the fleet, Victor continued. Positions will open. Matteo stiffened slightly. Sir, I don't want favors. This isn't a favor, Victor replied evenly. It's recognition. Isabella watched them both. The old guard and the future. Power and principle. Victor stepped back. I'll give you two space. He exited without another word. Matteo exhaled slowly. He's intense. She smiled faintly. You have no idea. They stood together under harbor lights, tension gradually easing. I don't want to lose you, she said quietly. He looked at her. You might. Honesty again. But not because of who you are, he added. Because of what leading will demand. She nodded. I won't choose the company over my integrity. That's not what I meant. I know. The harbor grew quieter as night deepened. Media vans slowly dispersed. Authorities completed final inspections. Tomorrow the ship would sail again. Under new command. Under scrutiny. Under her name. Matteo squeezed her hand gently. You've got a storm coming, he said softly. She looked out over the water. I was born in one. He smiled faintly. Yeah, he admitted. You were. The crisis had been contained. The captain arrested. The drugs seized. But the real test hadn't begun yet. Because exposing corruption was one thing. Rebuilding trust. That would require more than courage. It would require leadership. And by dawn, Isabella Delano would no longer be hiding in the shadows. She would be stepping into the light, with the entire fleet watching. 3 weeks later, the sea felt different. Not calmer, not safer, just honest. The Sovereign Star cut through open water under a pale sunrise, her hull freshly polished, her reputation still bruised but standing. Media cycles had begun shifting. The arrest of Captain Edward Hawthorne had expanded into a broader investigation, revealing offshore accounts, falsified cargo manifests, and connections that stretched embarrassingly close to boardroom influence. Gerald Hawthorne had resigned before formal suspension. The message was clear. The rot had not been random. It had been protected. Until it wasn't. And now, on the uppermost deck where chandeliers glittered beneath glass ceilings, Isabella Delano stood at the head of a long executive table. The board meeting was quiet. Different quiet than before. Not skeptical. Measured. Respectful. Victor sat to her right, no longer at the center. Observers from compliance and maritime regulation attended as well. Independent oversight committees will be embedded on every vessel, Isabella said, voice steady. Anonymous reporting channels will route externally, not through ship command. A board member cleared his throat. That level of transparency will reduce operational flexibility. It will reduce corruption, she replied evenly. Silence. We will also restructure crew housing rotations and shift scheduling, she continued. Fatigue breeds vulnerability. Vulnerability invites abuse. A few executives shifted uncomfortably. She met their eyes without flinching. We built this fleet on excellence, she said. Not exploitation. Victor watched her carefully. Not intervening. Not correcting. Just observing. For the first time, she wasn't speaking as his daughter. She was speaking as CEO. When the meeting adjourned, no one challenged her authority. They simply adjusted to it. Later that afternoon, Isabella changed into something simpler. Not a uniform, not a boardroom suit, just a navy blouse and slacks. She walked toward the lower deck without announcement. Crew members noticed her approach but didn't stiffen. They were still adjusting to seeing her openly now. Maria spotted her first. You're walking alone, Maria said bluntly. Yes. Good. Isabella smiled faintly. I wanted to check on supply distribution. Maria folded her arms. You came to see if we're still exhausted. That too. Maria studied her. You meant what you said at the meeting. Yes. Then don't let them water it down. I won't. Maria nodded once, satisfied. That captain, she added quietly. He made people afraid to speak. I know. You didn't. Isabella felt something warm flicker in her chest. That's the goal. Maria returned to work without ceremony. And that, somehow, meant more than applause. Down in engineering, Matteo was elbow-deep in a maintenance panel when she arrived. He didn't see her at first. She leaned casually against the bulkhead. You missed a bolt, she said lightly. He glanced up sharply. Don't scare me like that. She grinned faintly. You did miss one. He wiped his hands and stepped back. You're not supposed to be down here without escort, he teased. I'm the escort. He studied her for a moment. You look different. How? Less tense. She exhaled softly. I think I finally stopped bracing for impact. He nodded. That's good. Silence lingered comfortably between them. Not strained. Not uncertain. Just steady. I heard about the new oversight appointments, he said. Engineering's getting cross-department liaisons. Yes. Crew representation too. Yes. He stepped closer. You weren't kidding. No. He searched her face. You're going to change this place. I'm going to try. He hesitated briefly. People are talking. About what? About you working below deck. She tilted her head slightly. What are they saying? That you earned it. The words landed quietly, deeply. She didn't realize how much she needed to hear that until now. You helped, she said. I stood beside you. That's helping. He shrugged faintly. Feels different now. Why? He met her gaze directly. Because I don't know how to stand beside a CEO. She stepped closer, closing the gap between them. You stand the same way you always did, she said softly. And how was that? Equal. Something shifted in his expression. Relief mixed with disbelief. You really think that works? He asked. I think leadership without equality collapses. He smiled faintly. You sound like a policy document. She laughed, real unguarded. Occupational hazard. The hum of engines vibrated beneath their feet. The ship moved forward. as it always did. That evening, Isabella stood once more at the forward deck, the same place she had stood the night her father announced her succession. But this time, there were no chandeliers behind her, no cameras, just open sky. Victor joined her quietly. "You look at the sea like you're measuring it," he observed. "I am. And it's bigger than the company." He nodded. "It always was." She rested her hands on the rail. "I thought inheriting this meant control," she admitted. "But it's responsibility." Victor smiled faintly. "Control is an illusion. Responsibility is real." She glanced at him. "Are you proud?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word settled warmly. "I was afraid," she admitted quietly. "Afraid I'd only ever be your daughter in their eyes. And now, I don't care." He laughed softly. "That's when you're ready." They stood in silence for a while, watching sunlight melt into horizon. "I'm stepping back fully next quarter," Victor said eventually. "I know. You'll make enemies. I already have. You'll make allies too." She thought of Maria, of the crew, of Matteo. "I have," she said. Victor turned to leave, pausing briefly. "Don't lose yourself in the title," he said. "I won't." He walked away without another word. Night settled gently. The ship glided across dark water, no longer shadowed by scandal. Passengers dined upstairs, unaware of how close disaster had once sailed beside them. Below deck, shifts rotated smoothly under new protocols. Security reports routed externally. Cargo inspections doubled. Transparency replaced silence. And on the aft deck, under soft emergency lights, Isabella found Matteo waiting. "You're avoiding the formal dinner upstairs," he said. "I prefer this view." He leaned beside her. "So," he said lightly, "what does the CEO do after saving her empire?" She smiled. "Build it better." "And after that?" She looked at him. "Live." He studied her carefully. "Can you?" "Yes." He hesitated. "I don't want to be a secret." "You won't be." "I don't want to be a headline either." "You won't be that either." He let out a slow breath. "This won't be simple." "No. But it's real." "Yes." The wind carried salt and promise. He reached for her hand. This time, there was no hesitation. No shadow. No disguise. Just Isabella Delano no longer hiding. And Matteo no longer uncertain where he stood. The sea stretched endless before them. An empire no longer corrupted. A fleet no longer blind. And a leader who had scrubbed floors before claiming the helm. The ship moved forward into open water. And this time, it sailed clean. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.